Over the last 5 days, 75% of the calls that I've received have been people asking me, Mr. Smith, should I press that new button? And I bet you the majority of the people on this call are wondering, should I press that button? Now, there's pros and there's cons to pressing the button. Now, the pros are we all want tax-free money for our kids and our spouses and for when we get into long-term care situations. We all want that. But the cons are, especially as you're working as a federal employee, the cash out of pocket that you got to pay the taxes, going into higher tax brackets, not putting your kids through college, and you might not qualify for the certain financial aids just because you make too much money. And so today we're going to talk about how that all impacts our legacies. On Monday, my wife got a call. Her uncle passed, and we all drove to the house, and we got there, and this is a distant uncle, but we all got there, and the family's obviously mourning, and people were telling stories, and he was a Marine, and so people had all these Marine stories, and the families talking, and he was older, he was 79, so people and he wasn't well. The death was anticipated, and but as everybody's talking, the legacy and things like that started to come up. And the only thing I could think about was how much of the money that he's left behind is the IRS going to take? Because at some point, this family's going to sit around a table. They're going to look at the assets. He has a grandson that's getting ready to go to college in a couple years. And they're going to say, all right, how much did Ronnie leave? And when they come to that number, there's going to be a number, but there's going to be an actual number. And with the new laws that were passed in 2019, that number is going to be a lot less than what it would have been because the IRS has a bigger seat at the table now. And so as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about my family. I was thinking about the clients that I talk to on a daily basis. And the thing that I could not shake was we all have an opportunity now to make a decision on how much of a piece of what we leave is the IRS going to have their hands in. Because let me tell you, the way the tax laws are designed, they delayed the way RMDs are delayed. They delayed the amount of years that they go and take RMDs because that means there's more money for you to grow your TSP, so their pot grows. And at any point, they could change the way in which the laws operate around how much they can get their piece out. And that's what they did in 2019 and 2022. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about your legacy. And we're going to talk about the 3 risks that you run with doing the Roth conversion with the new TSP feature without a strategy. Because again, we all want the tax-free income, and we should. That's why you're on this call. That's why I study finance. I want to make sure that I'm leaving the proper legacy to my family. And so today, we're going to talk about the 3 risks that you run by pressing the Roth conversion button without the proper strategy. Risk number 1 is you pay taxes out of your pocket. When you do the Roth conversion button with TSP, they don't withhold the taxes. So if you want to convert $50,000 and you're in the 22% tax bracket, and of course it's according to your tax rate, your expected tax rate, but you could be paying upwards $11,000 out of your pocket. And so when I get those calls and we run those numbers for folks are like, well, I got my emergency money. I don't know when TSP is going to pay me my first income check when I retire. I want to keep all my cash on hand, which is not a bad idea. Plus, when you're working, you have a higher tax bracket. So number 1 is you got to with the TSP feature. Now, this is not all Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, but with the TSP feature, you have to pay the cash out of pocket. 50, they're going to convert to 50, but then now you owe the taxes. But you got to pay the taxes out of pocket. Okay, so that's risk number 1. If you don't strategize there, that could be a complete downfall. And there's many other ways to do it other than that. Risk number 2, your salary fills the glass first. When we look at these, when we're talking to folks about Roth conversions, we always look at where your income is. We take all that into consideration. We look at what tax brackets you're in, and then we look at the used versus unused amount within that certain tax bracket. Our goal is always keep you in that tax bracket. So when you're working though, your salary, especially as a federal employee, your salary is going to be pretty high up on the 22 to 24% tax bracket, depending on where you are. But now when you do that Roth conversion, that Roth counts. That's something that most people miss. That Roth is taxed as income. And so now you can push yourself into higher tax brackets. And so now you're paying higher taxes on your income and the Roth conversion, which gives the IRS more of your money. And so when you're retired, the reason why it's a much better time to do it is because now your income is shrunk. You got Social Security, but it's taxed at a different rate than regular income tax. And so then there's more room for you to pull from that traditional IRA and then put that Roth income on top of it, right? And so you're paying at a lower tax rate than what you pay when you're working. And so now that money grows at a because you pay less taxes. Now that money grows at a higher rate. It's just you're playing the game that the IRS that the rich folks play. Rich folks are tax strategists. They study this stuff because they want to make sure they pay the lowest amount of taxes. You should too, right? And so that's risk number two. Risk number three, and I've had this conversation with many folks, is just Mr. Smith is just too convenient. I just want to do it because it's convenient. They make stuff convenient a lot of times for good reasons. But again, if you're working, that's more money to the IRS just because you wanted to do something convenient, right? Another thing, that no tax withholding, huge thing because there's IRAs outside of the government where you can do that. They can withhold the taxes and you keep your cash in your pocket, right? Also, another risk is the fact that when you do roll the money into a Roth IRA, you're not getting the growth that you could get with different outside IRAs. And just because it's convenient doesn't mean it's complete because you're not creating a strategy that impacts your pension, your Social Security. It could impact IRMA, which is your Medicare. It can impact all those different things. Or the cash that you're taking out of your pocket is cash that you could be using to pay down debt, which makes a big difference. And so those three risks are huge that can impact your legacy, right? And so Roth gone wrong, you convert too fast, you explode your bracket, impact your IRMA surcharges if you're in your 60s. You convert at peak salary, paying way too much. And it's a multi-year plan. When we do Roth conversion for folk, we want to make sure that we're looking at over at least the next 7 years of doing Roth conversions. And you want to keep that pace going because when you retire, you do it those first 7 years, you're at your lowest tax rate at that time. Knock that out by the time you're in your late 60s, before you get to RMD ages. Now you have all your money sitting in the Roth situation that impacts your long-term care, the money you're leaving for your grandkids, and so forth and so on. And so at Fed Legacy, we talk about the financial house a lot because part of our financial house is making sure that we're making those proper Roth conversions. So when I think about Uncle Ronnie, me and him, he was distant, but we've had one or two conversations around money. I know he was just a hands-off, passive guy. He didn't really pay much attention. Now, I know he left money, not knowing how much, but I know he didn't have real strategy because that's just not his personality. He was just a old school black dude, just let it take care of itself. But when it comes to strategy, we always want to make sure you have that foundation in place. And one of the things we focus on is making sure that when there's money that you want to leave your kids, or money that you want to leave your spouse, or income that you might need in the future, we want to make sure as early as we possibly can that we get that money into a place where that money's coming to you in a tax-free status. That's really important because you want to make sure the IRS is just out of your business. I can't stress this enough. In 2019, they made a huge tax law change with this 10-year rule, and you really had no say about it. But they did, and now it impacts billions and billions and billions of dollars that are in TSP that is sitting in traditional TSP. And you had no choice, right? You go from your family getting taxed in the $300,000 range, possibly on a lot of money, or the $100,000 range, to six, seven, $800,000 ranges just by simple legislation that was changed that you really didn't have any say in. And that's the power of being in a tradition. That's the power that the government has when your money's in a traditional IRA or traditional TSP. It's all good when you're working, and people say when we get on these calls all the time, the people are like, "Well, is that before or after taxes?" And if you say, and this is when we talk about life insurance and stuff like that, people are like, "Is that coming out before or after taxes?" Because I want it coming out before. I mean, after taxes, right? Before, I'm sorry, before taxes. And so that sounds all good when you're working. It sounds like a great thing, but the government's always coming back for theirs. They let that stuff bake in the oven, bake in the oven, bake in the oven, bake in the oven until that pie gets big, 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 big. Then it's like, all right, now I want my slice. And that's the way the system's designed, right? And so what you want to do is you want to play again. You want to give them their piece when you're still stirring up the ingredients, right? When it's this small, we always say when we're in our trainings and we're talking, it's like, look, you want to tax the seed, not the harvest. Tax me on that seed. Tax me on that, please, but not the harvest because it's so much larger. So we go back to this financial house. We talk about that foundation. Then we talk about the walls. The walls are just like the walls in your house, making sure when it comes to the walls in your house, every house should have insulation in it, and then you insulate yourself from the outside elements. And so the outside elements, when it comes to your retirement, is the taxes that you pay that you can't control. You can't control that, and inflation. You want to make sure that your retirement is set up in a way that you can control your money so that that those two things don't impact you because they're coming, but you can do certain things to mitigate them. You can't eliminate it, but you can definitely mitigate it, out strategize it. The next thing we talk about is the roof, and the roof is a big one because the roof is about making sure your money is growing and not sitting in a dormant space. And oftentimes when people retire, we do this thing, we do a risk assessment. We always want to know is how risk averse are you, right? And so a lot of people say, nope, Mr. Smith, I want 100% of my money in the G fund. If we look at the G fund, 2%, you think you're avoiding risk, but you take a huge risk because if you look at the cost of healthcare, if you look at the cost of groceries, if you look at the cost of travel, if you look at the cost of those things, they're going up more than 2% a year. I'll tell the story of how healthcare, we've seen healthcare in our retirement sessions double over the last 5 years when it comes to what married couples are paying for in retirement, what single people are paying in retirement. Like we've seen that cost double. It used to be $200, $300 for a person, health FEHB in retirement. Now that number's up to $500, $600 a month. And the people that are retired are still paying that same cost. Their income hasn't gone up at that pace. But the thing that we help you understand is we want to make sure your money is growing at a pace like that. Like I have a lady when she retired, she had all her ducks in a row. We made sure everything was in a row. She's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna need any income. I have my pension, I got my social security, I don't got a whole lot of debt." And then she hit me last year. She's like, "Hey, Miss Smith, I want to. I think I'm gonna take an extra $3,000 a month out of my out of my IRA because I just want the money, you know." And that 3,000 was last year. Well, that was a bit the year before last, and then last year, mid late year, she's like, "Well, let's bump that up to 3,500." And we get calls like that all the time of people who retire, and then it's like, "Oh well, I need a little bit extra money," almost like they're apologetic. It's your money. You don't know what expenses are going to hit you in retirement. The thing that you want to do though is to make sure that when you do, it will win. And if you do need money in retirement, that your money that you're taking is not depleting your TSP or depleting an IRA because you need it. You want to make sure that even though you're drawing down money, your money is either staying still in place because it's still growing or it's growing, right? It's either stagnant or still growing. But if it's chopping down, chopping down, chopping down, chopping down to like 100,000, 50,000, because your money's not growing and the cost of things are going up, that could be a very scary thing. And that's why you want to make sure you have a financial house built. And of course, that's our metaphor, but we've been doing this now for 17 years now, and we've seen clients go the full gamut. And so you want to make sure that your money is strategically invested and strategically planned, strategically, your income is coming in a strategic way so that you don't have to worry about coming back to work in retirement or burdening your kids in retirement, right? Because the one thing that I'm sure Uncle Roddy didn't want to do is have the IRS have a big seat at the table when it comes to him leaving his legacy. So here's why that's important. Here's an example of a real client without the tax strategy. As you can see, this is step one is concurrent scenario. The one next to it is the Roth conversion tax strategy. This green bar that you see here, this green bar is all the money that's in the Roth IRA. The project is obviously this is projected, right? But this is the projected money that will be in her Roth IRA by the time she's 85. That's money that's tax free going to her. She would have passed. That money goes to her kids. IRS doesn't even know about it. It's all their money. If she didn't do the Roth conversion strategy at age 85, she would have had 675,000 in that traditional TSP. That money is still subject to taxation. Now, how much goes to her kids versus doesn't just depends on how successful her kids are. If her kids are decent, making decent income, that money that they take out is going to go on top of their taxable income. Boom, more money for the IRS. They're happy. Now they're getting 32%, 37%, or whatever it is. They're happy. Why wouldn't they be? Now they all that money out of 600,000, they're getting 250. They're happy because because that kid is successful, or those kids are successful, or the grandkids, all because of that. Now the IRS gets a bigger chunk. Whereas if you're proactive about it, when you're in your lowest tax years, you do those Roth conversions, $855,000 goes to the family. Everybody's happy, you know? And so these are tax strategies that matter so much because it's things you can do ahead of time to save yourself from having to pay the IRS in large ways. So going back to the TSP implant conversion, what things you got to look out for, the limited options in the TSP. TSP has 5 funds, right? The C fund, great fund. S fund, great fund. I fund, is having a great year, but if you look at the last 10 years, the returns are very low. And so that lets you know it's super volatile. As you're retiring, that's a hard thing you don't want to be in retirement taking money, having money in an account the year that you need it, that account nosedives 20% and you're drawing out on it. That's a nightmare. And you're paying tax on it. That's a nightmare. So you want to make sure you have your money in places that have much more diversity in what you can invest in. So you can have a more robust fund. And the downside is just the G and the F fund they're just not good as safe places to park your money because the last 10 years is 2%, two and some change for the G, 1% for the F. There's just better bond type funds to put your money in. So the TSP has limited options there. They don't allow for the tax withholdings, which again impacts your emergency fund cash. Then there's no strategy. I mean, you press a button, you do it, and you don't, you know, everybody needs a coach. I was talking to a lady yesterday, and she's a nurse at VA, and she was like, "Mr. Smith, I just don't know this stuff." And I was like, "I don't know medicine either." And she was like, "Well, here's the thing." She was like, "If you have an issue with you need some medicine advice or having some issues, you call me." And I was like, "All right." She was like, "And if I have some financial stuff, I'm gonna call you." And I was like, "Deal." That's it. There's no strategy when you just press the button. And so again, the next thing is just cash from emergency funds. Most things that, when people retiring, they're always like, well, I want more cash in my pocket. You know, paying the IRS $20,000 in cash for a Roth conversion for most federal employees isn't a thing, right? It's just not a way most people are wanting to do it. When you have your strategic IRA conversion, there's full flexibility, tax planning built into the process when we do it. We talk about the other things like your pension, your social security, making sure those things, the states you live in, making sure there's strategy around that. Making sure there's a multi-year approach to it. We don't look at just the 1 year, the one action in the vacuum. We look at this action and how it's going to impact the next couple of actions. Keep your cash in your pocket, and also make sure when you're 75 years old or and above that money is cash going to your family without the IRS involved, no matter how high it grows, right? So what I want to do is invite you to book a call. We do a free strategy call. We'll put the link below. But when is your time, like it was Uncle Ronnie's time recently, just, and I think about this for me too, is that when it's that time, I want all of my money going to my kids and my wife and my family, whoever I did, or my charities. I don't want the IRS sitting at the table because without a plan, they will sit at the table. The thing is, we just don't know how big the seat of the bit is. Are they sitting at the head of the table? Are they sitting in the kitty seat? Are they are they standing up looking over? They will be there if you don't have a strategy because it's designed that way. It's designed that way. When they pushed the RMDs back a couple years ago, a lot of people were like, "Oh, they're giving us more time." No, they're giving you more time. All right, they're giving you more time as that money compounds. Even now, as the market's up and everything like that, people are excited, but so is the IRS because they're analyzing this stuff. They're looking at, okay, we got all this money coming to us, or we can flip a switch, and then all of a sudden now all this money is due to us because that money is not all yours. And so we ask people all the time, how much of this money in your TSP is your money? How much of it? Okay, whatever you say. But what I want you to do, book a call, be in my team. We have 5 advisors. We talk about this stuff all the time when it comes to strategies around this. We share as a group. We make sure we're not missing anything. We cross our T's, dot our I's, and we're happy to support you in your journey to making sure your family has a legacy that you could be proud of. And so I want to open this up for questions. I see we got a lot of questions here. I might not be able to answer them all, but I want to make sure that we answer. George said, if I can afford the taxes. George, yeah, if you can afford the taxes, man, that's great, right? That's great. But you can also maybe invest that cash in a different place and get the growth. But man, if you can afford the cash, that's amazing. Just a lot of people can't, And so, do you support the life cycle funds? Ruth, yeah, life cycle funds are good. I mean, life cycle funds can be good, yes, for sure. Nothing wrong with the life cycle funds. The only issue with the life cycle funds, and I say this all the time, is when the life cycle funds are designed, they were designed, they were really designed for people that are not federal employees. And so here's what I mean. Because they're designed with the thought that when you retire, you're going to need income. I've sat with thousands of folks. 90% of the people we sit with, 9 out of 10 of the people I sit with, do not need income from their TSP right away when they retire. And the reason why is because you have your pension and you have your Social Security. For most people, that takes care of their bills. And if it doesn't, you might need like a little bit from your TSP. The life cycle funds are designed as if you need the entire TSP for income come the date you retire, meaning they want to move all the money into the L income fund, and the L income fund is parked in the majority G fund. About almost 70% of the money's in the G fund, so you're getting very little returns because what they're thinking is, oh, this person's drawing income right now. And so with the TSP, when it comes to your retirement, you want to be able to grow wealth. Most retirement advice is built for people that need income right away when they retire. So you watch the news and most people are like, oh, you want to put this in this safe investment, save this, save this. Nothing wrong with security at all. It's just as federal employees, you could take on a little bit more risk in retirement because you're not using the money right away. You're just not. Most people that are retired, if you talk to your friends that are retired, who are forest retirees, and you talk to them, I guarantee you they're not taking lots of money from their TSP on a monthly basis. They're just not, because they just don't need to. And so what that does is that leads them to the opportunity to grow more money over time. Okay. Is there a deadline coming up for Roth converts? The deadline is just, there's no deadline. Like I've heard people ask me this week, like, Mrs. Smith, I heard I have to take all my money out of my traditional, put it in the Roth. That's not a thing. You have to, like it was like a deadline this year or something like that. No, it just opened up the Roth conversion ability within TSP, but there's no deadline for that. The only quote unquote deadline is based on your date of birth. Once you turn 72, 74 for the most part, you're going to be due RMDs. It just depends on your birthday. And so what that means is at that point, the IRS is going to force you to take withdrawals so that they can get their money. So it's like, all right, and it's based on a percentage. And so they're going to say, well, all right, you got to take out 20,000 so that we can get five because that's what you owe us. They're not going to let you just sit and let it defer. So that's what I would say is a deadline, but it's not like you have to take all your money. The strategy is to get as much money into a Roth account before that time period so that they're not forced you to take as much and your money can grow tax free for a longer period of time. All right. Verdini said, I was told because I turned 73 this year, I would need to think about TSP. So, Verdinia, yes, you should, because you're at the point now where they're about to, this is probably your last year where you could just leave your money into the traditional TSP and the IRS not send you a letter forcing you to, telling you you have to start taking money. And they're going to do that every year from here on out. Which the opportunity for you is to be strategic and start doing it on your terms so that you can get more and more money into into a Roth TSP, Roth IRA, whatever, so that now your money can grow on that Roth side. And then if something would have happened to you, you pass on, you're not leaving a chunk of money in the traditional TSP because then this is going to create a tax problem for whoever you're leaving that money to because they're going to have 10 years now to withdraw all that money and that can become problematic to them because their tax portion is going to be a lot higher than what yours is right now. And so if you want to talk about that, sure, I have my team reach out to you and we could talk about it, but that is a thing that's coming up. What is the minimum age? What is the minimum age? 59 and a half that you can withdraw, taking that you could begin. Yes, Tracy, 59 and a half is the minimum age you could begin taking TSP withdrawals from your TSP without the 10% penalty if you're working. If you're retired, you could do it at 57 if you have 30 years of service, or 55 if you have 30 years of service. But if you have at 57, you could do it as well. All right. Thanks, Shauna, for taking care of that. So I'm hearing that your money keeps growing even after retirement. Yes, your TSP continues to grow after you retire. That's a question a lot of people ask, as if the TSP just turns off your growth ability. You can't put in any money, but you could definitely take money out. I mean, you can't put in any more money, but you can definitely grow money. Do your program basically provide a plan for X amount of years to make move? Our program doesn't, it's not like based around years or anything. We just help you where you are, to be honest with you, Angela. It's not about it's not a year thing. It's just we help you where you are, and then we help you manage it into the future, is what we do. Is there a time limit on withdrawals from Roth plans? Yes. So the first 5 years, so if you have a Roth IRA, if you have any Roth IRA open, you have to have a Roth IRA open for 5 years, right? So if you have one open already and it's been longer than 5 years, then you're good. But there's a 5 year window that you have to have a Roth in general. All right, I think we're good. We'll be back next week. We'll be going over Social Security, when to take it, some of the pros and cons of that, and how to strategize around Social Security. And so we'll be here every Wednesday. Thank y'all for coming out, and we'll see y'all soon.